draw a circle or later an ellipse in perspective is actually quite difficult because they're very organic and geometrical shapes, but there are certain steps we can take to help us estimating better the shape so they look more believable. So the nature of a circle is actually the following. We can start with a proportional square. And inside the square, I will actually do this in red, we can draw diagonals. Okay, so the diagonals actually figure out the midpoint of the square. And then through the midpoint, we can actually then draw a horizontal line. And we can also draw a vertical line. Because then what we achieved with this is simply finding the midpoints, left, right, top, bottom, on the square. Okay. So, and the importance of these midpoints is actually that when we draw a circle, the circle will touch those corner points. Midpoints. So if we turn on our ellipse or circle template, you can see if I would draw now a circle, the circle perfectly rests inside a square. However, there is actually a secondary element to pay attention to. Because while we draw from there and there an arc, how could we figure out where actually the circle intersects those diagonals? And when we draw a rectangle from this point to this point, you will see actually that the rectangle cuts each diagonal where also the circle cuts it. And the whole idea is that we have actually kind of 1/3 marks. So 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. And at the first 1/3 mark, the circle actually runs through it. Let me show you another interesting element to know about circles. A circle in perspective will always look like an ellipse. And the ellipse is a great element to demonstrate the meaning of major and minor axes. So I will create, let's say, a red line from there to there. This line is really long. And because it's really long, we just call it major axis. Very easy. And then there is this line, the green one. And we call this one minor axis. From here to here, we can always rotate it. So the ellipse is the same because again, a circle in perspective will be an ellipse. And another important element is the major and minor axes are always 90-degree perpendicular to each other. And there's another element actually how one could maybe understand the meaning of what the minor axis means. So I will just put down here a quick 2D sketch of a cylinder. Obviously that's perspectively not correct, but it's not a problem. Because all I would like to demonstrate here is simply here we have another major axis for that back part, and this green line, let's say, goes down till there. So this is actually also the center. And think about this green line as an axis that connects two wheels on a car. And the red line always defines kind of like the maximum width of the wheel. So red the width, and the green always goes to a vanishing point because it works like an axis, and they are both 90 degrees to each other. So keep that memorized. So let's try this one out on a perspective square. And you see, this is actually a sketch I quickly did, 45, 45, drafted up a cube. So I have a proportional vertical square. It's really important that you have a good proportional square, because otherwise you can't really construct a circle in perspective, which would be an ellipse. Okay, so step number 1, we want to have the diagonals there. And there. Okay, good. With these diagonals, now we can actually create nice vertical lines. There and there. So I see actually where they cut the midpoint. And then actually I have to run a line through where these two diagonals cut each other, because then there and there are the other two midpoints. Okay. So now I have to figure out the 1/3. And let me show you a small little trick. So here I will draw in a complete square, and I will tell you why you can do something like this. So with this square constructed, I can draw a midline. And the midline, a diagonal. And the diagonal helps me to kind of guess where is maybe the midpoint. Because I can't just take this distance and eyeball and say 1/3 and 1/3, because essentially this distance gets shorter. So these 1/3 can't be the same, but maybe what could work is the 1/3 and 1/3 and 1/3 all get a step smaller. And I would use the closest edge to you because it's the biggest distance to work on. If you make a mistake here, not a big deal. If you make a mistake on a small line, the outcome will be much more drastic. So why this is helpful is, so let's say I decided that's actually where maybe by guessing the 1/3 mark is. You see, I can actually run always to either vertical or to the vanishing point array, and then always mark the lines where it cuts the diagonal. And let's put this one to there and this one to there, and that should meet up. And yes, it does. And you see there and there, they all meet. Perfect. Okay, so essentially here I have that other rectangle. I only marked these lines either on the mid edge or the diagonal so you can see it better. In Sketchbook Pro, I can actually, with the ellipse tool, really well now demonstrate to you the importance of major and minor axes and how an ellipse has to be rotated. What most people might do when they're new to it, they would actually maybe say, well, ellipse there, scale this one up so it fits in, maybe a little bit wider. There. Okay, a little bit taller. There. Okay, there's my ellipse. And you will see, not really, because the highest points of my ellipse do not run through these midpoints. Because the thing is, in perspective, a circle will look like a rotated ellipse. So now I have to rotate actually this ellipse. And I mentioned before the major and minor axis. You see now the dotted line, that's actually the minor axis. And I said also the minor axis has to run through a vanishing point there. So maybe this can be a little bit lower. Let's see how this looks. There. Yeah, okay. Maybe a little bit bigger and a little bit slimmer. Yeah. So plus minus there, my cube seems to be a little bit off, which is why my ellipse does not perfectly fit in. but let's scale this a little bit more and adjust it. Okay, good enough. And there you see now with the ellipse rotated, it always runs actually through these points. So let's draw the ellipse. There it is. And there is also this one point I need, because I would like to show you how in perspective this whole idea of major and minor axes looks like. There is my minor axis, and I said this one actually goes through the vanishing point, and the major axis is always 90 degree, so perpendicular to the minor axis. There we are, and there it is. So that's basically really what you have to pay attention to, and realize that an ellipse in perspective has to be rotated, and it cannot actually be just going straight vertical up and down. If you follow that rule also with the midpoints and the third points on the diagonals, with some practice you will get pretty sufficient at constructing ellipses in 2-point perspective.